My heartiest welcome to Mr. Prabhat Mishra. I mean, he is a distinguished guest. I'm really glad to have him with us. Before us starting, I'll just give him a basic introduction about the speaker. And Mr. Mishra has done BTech from IIT Kanpur in electrical engineering. Later, he did a master's in public administration in international development from the Kennedy School, Harvard University. Mr. Mishra has been a member of Indian Administrative Service. He is presently the Principal Secretary in the Water Resource Department in Government of West Bengal. He is also the project director of West Bengal Accelerated Development of Minor Irrigation Projects. Mr. Mishra has held several assignments as a member of IS, and he has been a district magistrate of in and not 24 Parganas district. He has also worked as director infrastructure at the Department of Economic Affairs in the Government of India. He was secretary in the Department of Environment and Department of Fisheries with the Government of West Bengal. So that's a brief introduction. So we are really glad to have you, sir. So Professor Biswas, you want to say something? Please unmute. Professor Biswas, yeah.
Thank you, Indradev. Mr. Mishra, welcome to IRMA. Though virtually, but we would love to have you here someday, here physically in IRMA. But you know, COVID and we'll have to wait for that time. But I think we did not wait for that time. Now you're here, and we are really glad that you could find some time from your very valuable time. You could find some time out to come and address this session. I would take this opportunity in couple of minutes to introduce you to IRMA. IRMA was established in 1979, 14th December. So it was established because first time uh, people talked about management, and management was you know, has come up by that time. But managers coming out of the formal those days there were three management schools, uh, Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and Calcutta, three IIMs I'm talking about. um, our founder, Dr. Kurian, who wanted to spread dairy throughout the country, he was looking for able managers who could handle this huge movement across the country. And he went to the IIMs and seeking some managers, that way the managers can come in and work for this great project, this movement, which you used to love to call as movement. But nothing of that sort happened. And then his cousin, who was the first director of IIM Ahmedabad, Professor Ravi Mathai, he advised Dr. Kurian that, look, this from IIMs, managers will not go and work in rural areas. Maybe we are not training them for those things. You will have to, if you want rural managers, you need to have your own institution. And that propelled Dr. Kurian to establish Institute of Rural Management, Anand, where his idea was that to bring in management as a discipline is important. But at the same time, it should be tuned to the needs of people of this country, rural people. So the students not only need to learn all those principles and practices of management, but also need to learn the contextual elements, which has overpowering impact on the management of those institutions of what we call generally the rural people's institutions. So those days we were only talking about cooperatives as rural people's institutions, particularly the dairy cooperatives. But later on, we started talking about all other types of collective enterprises, all other types of collective. It's not just cooperative, but all types of collective enterprises or people's enterprises. So IRMA has been for the last over 40 years, 41 years, and we have been trying to address those issues. And but at the same time, let me make a confession. Uh, we are a very small institute in a country of 1.3 billion. We are a very small, absolutely small. We have about 35 faculty, 35, 40 faculty, um, a small little campus. And where the Dr. Kurian had put it, I would just put him a small institution with a big impact. Though I don't know that the country has to tell us what sort of impact IRMA has been having. But our alumni, they work in almost all sectors, from fisheries to dairy to forestry, and grassroots rural development, including health sectors. So therefore, they have, but this has been as we would say that we try to make the right kind of particularly informing the policy, informing the management, the managers, so that they can take better decisions, and at least we will have and our whole objective. I will just end it by saying that Dr. Kurian used to say that leave this world a slightly better place than what you have got when you came into this world. So that's our motto. Thank you so much, sir, having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Viswas, for sharing some about IRMA's mission visions. So I think then now we will invite Mr. Mishra for the talk. So now the floor is to Mr. Mishra. So sir, please, it's now your floor. So
thank you, Professor Day, and thank you, Professor Vishwas. It is a real pleasure, and thank you for the invitation. I hope to cover some of our experiences in handling challenges in development. I have a presentation also, which I will share. I mean, we willy-nilly, whatever be the context and whatever be the compulsions, we find that government has to handle and has to keep handling certain issues in society, and especially when it comes to touching the poor who are not touched by market. And there are so many asymmetries of information and so many imperfections all around. So in that context, government keeps doing its bit. But then government being government, and the way we are, we have a lot of challenges that we face. We also try to do things at scale, and we try to do it with a team which is generally they have to do both the regulatory and the developmental administration. So the mindset has to switch. You have to wear the regulatory hat for some time, and then you have to leave that hat, wear the developmental hat, and sometimes it is not so easy. So let us run through the presentation and some of the issues I hope to bring out, and then we will leave the house for open for questions. So I'll share a screen. I hope the screen is visible to
yes, sir.
everybody. Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay, thank you. So with the context that I was just mentioning, I have been working in government for quite some time now, and both in rural context and urban context. And the fact remains that there are a large number of I have put these challenges into some buckets, and I'm coming from a special project actually. So I will take that as an example to elicit what we are talking about, and that's why I'm putting up before you this public policy problem, that how to enhance the agricultural production of the small and marginal farmers. Now, there are a large number of problems in government. So I picked up this one because number one, I'm handling this. Number two, this is indeed a big problem because if you see the developmental literature, there is a whole lot of conclusions, a whole lot of discussion about why small and marginal farmers suffer and how their productivity is low, how they are more vulnerable, and so on and so forth. So this is a public policy problem which I have been handling for the last 4 years at Project Director in West Bengal Accelerated Development of Minor Irrigation Project. And in that context, I will put up certain challenges and then how we have tried to address them in this project. So the major challenges that I have been able to identify is how to identify and aggregate the poor. The issue is that everybody has a target population. So if a private company is selling, let's say, a toothpaste, they have a target. There is an audience, who will buy, the user. Similarly, government also has a target. We cannot spread our resource so thin that it doesn't really make an impact. So the issue is that we try to reach out to the person who really needs it. Now that becomes a major problem. And if I say that we have to handle the small and marginal farmers, then we find that when you try to implement something, there are a whole lot of people who are not the small and marginal farmers. So how to really get around that and reach to the right people? And that is the first thing. The second thing is that our context, since we do things at scale, so the geographical areas, the agroclimatic zones and all that varies so much that one design doesn't really work. And in government, the way we operate, we have certain guidelines, and that guidelines are passed on to the lower strata of the administration, and then those are basically executed. But then the problem is that once you have these strict the guidelines, then they may not fit in, and then there is a problem. But the feedback loop is so much delayed that by the time you know that it is not working, a lot of time is wasted. So there are these problems, and then there is a project management issue, how to do it in a time-bound fashion. It is a huge machinery. Then when you do something and try to say that yes, we have made this, we have done this, we have implemented this, then how to measure its impact? That is another very big problem in the system for various reasons. Number one, data is not properly collected, data is not very authentic, there are 2-3 people collecting data, and so on. And then we, as an institution, we are not always very efficient. There are a lot of frictions, there are a lot of imperfections. So I'll be talking about all these as we go along. So the first thing is that we must chase something which is really a problem. I mean, there should not be a case in which there is no problem, but we are trying to solve it. So that is a basic issue in governance, and defining a problem and its identification of the binding constraint which needs to be addressed to really solve that problem is something which is very important. Quite often in government, when we do things, this step is not properly addressed. So, we just in a knee-jerk manner, we do things, and then the binding constraint is not known, so we keep doing things, but then, it doesn't get resolved. And in the public policy problem that I highlighted in the beginning of my presentation, the small land holdings and poor economies of scale is certainly a very, very big issue, because if you are trying to address the small and marginal farmers, they are all located in tiny, tiny places all around. Reaching out to them, it's a humongous task. It's very easy to do it in a small area, but if you talk about it, let's say at scale, at a very big scale, then it becomes a problem. And then, of course, the problem of adverse selection and moral hazard. The issue is that quite often when we say that we are trying to pick up people who are poor and we will address their needs, then either we have to have some survey or have to have some other mechanism to identify the poor. The problem with surveys are they are very time taking, it's very costly, and world over so many surveys have been done, and none of these surveys are really free from errors. I mean, there are all kinds of people who should not have been there, they fall into the main list. Then there are people who are poor but they are not in the list and so on. So these surveys are quite difficult. And then there is this moral hazard issue. Once I recall, we were trying to do some cooperatives, some milk cooperatives in Bankura, and there was this rickshaw puller. So his wife was at home, so we thought that maybe if a
Mr.
cow
Mishra, I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
yeah, please.
I'm from IRMA. Sir, your voice is a bit low. People are keying in messages in the chat box that your voice is very low.
Okay. Sure. I'll try to speak a little louder. Maybe my microphone has some problem. Now, is it all right?
It is better, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So, sorry about that. What I was trying to explain is that there are these problems of adverse selection and moral hazard. Adverse selection, as the name suggests, people who really don't deserve to be addressed are being addressed. They are in the bucket, and this is a big problem. Pick up any program in government, and there are cases of adverse selection. And then there is this moral hazard. Moral hazard, actually, I faced in Bankura when we were building some cooperatives. And once there was a rickshaw puller, and we gave a cow to that household in the hope that the wife is sitting idle, so she will rear the cow. And then there was a chilling plant, so there was a forward link and everything. But then suddenly, I realized that later this rickshaw puller stopped pulling the rickshaw. He said that now we have a cow, so I will not do anything. My wife is looking after the cow and this. So these things keep happening in developmental administration. Now, when I am talking about the small and marginal farmers, a little bit of analysis as to what ails this sector, whether the constraint is supply side or demand side. And indeed, there is a lot of supply side problem. There is high fixed cost related to the infrastructure cost, and there are externalities for surface irrigation schemes, which makes it slightly difficult and for the private players to come in, and therefore there is a market failure. So there is definitely a case for government intervention here. Then there are tube wells where there's a lot of rent seeking going on, and this rent seeking happens because there is no other service provider in the area. So again, government has to chip in and put up maybe a second tube well and so on. So the scale is low. There is a lot of knowledge gap. It's very difficult to reach out. That the transaction cost is too high. If you try to reach out to small and marginal farmers, telling them the best practice in agriculture and technology, and it becomes quite difficult. Then there is demand side constraint, low demand for subsistence crops produced by farmers. So in our context, when we are handling our project, WBAD MIP, we decided to address the supply side constraint and chip in to address the market failure that is happening all around. And to address the P's, the project has been designed like this. Like, we have some minor irrigation schemes, and we do it through the water user associations because it is not easy to reach out to smaller marginal farmers individually. So you better make a group of these farmers and make water user associations. So that is an important piece in our initiative. And indeed, through that platform and through that group, what we do is we try to give inputs on agriculture, horticulture, and fishing. So a single window kind of thing in which, another problem in developmental administration. I will be talking about it a little later also, uh, because in a single window, nothing comes in government. I mean, in development, I have seen everybody does their own stuff, every department, and they work in silos. So there are problems. Uh, so this is, in a nutshell, the project that I will be referring to again and again. It started in 2012, and now it is being continued. Earlier it was funded by World Bank, but now it is being continued with the help of state plan budget. It is in all districts, uh, and a large number of water users associations have been formed. We have a very long experience now with working with community very intensively. So that's what it is. So how we have resolved this problem of identification. So we didn't go for any survey. We have taken an area approach in which, you put up the irrigation infrastructure in single crop and rain-fed areas, in the hope that most of people living there are poor and underdeveloped and so on and so forth. So it is a kind of, it was slightly difficult in the earlier phase of the project. The emphasis was not on single cropped and rain-fed areas. It was in fact being done in the entire state, but we understand after 2-3 years, we just changed our course of action, and then we started concentrating on 3 solid areas. In fact, we are now working very intensively on the Western Lateritic Zone. Then we have coastal saline zone and the hilly areas of Darjeeling and Kalimpong. So we said that nothing doing, we will go by these areas because we understand and it is acknowledged that people living here are poor and we need to address them. So that is the thing. But what about other areas? So other areas where we have alluvial soil and we have 4, 5, 6 crops, farmers are well off, literacy rate is high, we realize that the binding constraint and the problem really is not that there are no tube wells and infrastructure. I mean, there is a whole lot of infrastructure. In fact, there is a very large number of tube wells in these areas, more than what it should have been, because the groundwater is getting stressed now, as we understand. But then the water management is a big issue. Farmers do flood irrigation, so we are focusing on water management in other areas. In order to make our effort inclusive, we have focused a little more on tribal areas, tribal population, and women, so that these are the groups which are left out in development. So that is what it is. We have also involved local NGOs who really help us getting connected to these people, and we have gone for an integrated approach. Like if we pick up an area, there we have a check dam, and there are some water retention structures. In the upper catchment, we have some horticulture, and so on and so forth, so that as an area, there is a holistic development. Because what happens generally, if you put up a check dam and there are a few people who are getting benefited, then others who are nearby, they feel bad about it, and that becomes a problem. You can see this is a West Lateritic Zone, some 6 districts there. Then we have the hilly areas of Darjeeling and Kalimpong, and the third one is the coastal saline zone. Coastal saline zone, as you know, there are a lot of problems because you cannot take out water. It's all saline. You can't do agriculture with that groundwater, and a lot of problems. So that is the difficulty. So that is also, we have a documentary on that today. Hopefully, we will be able to show you. Having said that, how do we design interventions at large scale, and how do we manage our projects? So there are, for example, in West Bengal, we have 5 different agroclimatic zones, and each zone has its own special problems and, of course, opportunities. The good thing about governance is, if an area is having a problem, it also throws up certain opportunities which can be capitalized, and that is how nature works. And the fundamental requirement in developmental administration is to recognize this, understand this, and allow the flexibility. As I will just show you how one has to become flexible. Otherwise, because one site doesn't really fit all. So that is what it is. Then there is another problem of how we select the scheme sites. Let's say we have to build a check dam, and then there are a whole lot of sites. How do you finalize it? Which one to pick up, etc., etc. Then the schemes, how they will be appraised, how there will be approval, and then how it will be implemented. It becomes a very huge issue because when you are talking of something like 2,000 schemes spread across the state, the project management becomes quite difficult. Your expenditure will be low. There are problems, tendering, and all those issues are there. So it becomes a challenge. And since the project machinery is very huge, so you're not synchronized. I mean, people move in different directions, becomes slightly difficult. So how we address this in WB-ADMI? First of all, we said that there has to be a complete design flexibility to customize design for different agroclimatic zone. I will just come. There are some 4-5 slides for each agroclimatic zone as to how we have gone about it. But I will say that this is something very critical and fundamental. If we do not have that flexibility to begin with, I mean, it really it fails. It is not possible to make an impact. Then we have also have this GIS platform based systems which is used in check dam site selection, in planning, design, and now finally monitoring also. I'll come to that a little later. We have also tried to tap traditional wisdom, like they make earthen check dams to collect water in rainy season. Now, what happens is that when there is flash flood, this gets washed away. But then our engineers have repeatedly told me that these earthen dams are placed at the best sites. Somehow people know the best sites. They have this traditional knowledge. So what we do, we catch hold of these sites and we convert them into concrete check dams. So that's what it is. We also have a WhatsApp group of all project functionaries, and we keep interacting. I mean, that has really helped in keeping each, what is happening where. Plus, if we have to synchronize each other's efforts and move properly, then this group has become very, very vital. And indeed, we have gone for Water User Association as implementing agency also in project management. When things like horticulture, when the things are very time bound, you have to do pit cutting, you have to plant trees, and all this has have to happen very, very. It's a critical 2-3 months when the rainy season comes and it goes away. So we have realized that if you go for tendering and all those problems, then you miss the bus. So Water User Associations, finally we have involved them and we have got brilliant results because they do work in their own land. So they are maintaining the quality, the pit cutting. We don't have to even see the size of the pits. They are textbook style pits. I mean, uh, there is absolutely no problem. The way we have difficulty with when we handle contractors, because if you don't measure, then there will be some problem and all that. But then here, absolutely fine. If you come and the mortality rates were so low, some 3 to 5% only. We have already taken up some 1,200 hectares of horticulture plantation in the state under the project, and it was the Water User Association where the implementing agency, and they did it on their own land, and the result is fabulous. It happened because they have a big stake in the asset which is being created. So that is how we resolved that. And it saved us a lot of time also because we didn't have to go for tendering and all those formalities. So that was a great thing that we learned. Now, if you look at this western ladder, this is a western laterite existing, a lot of undulations. So we go for check dams, pump ducts, water detention structures. These are the critical, the water harvesting structures and other kind of infrastructure which are very suited to this area. And accordingly, we have gone for a lot of intercropping, self-help groups, and all that. This is coastal saline zone. Here, groundwater is not available. We have to rely on surface water. There is a lot of rainfall. So what we did, we realized that there were a large number of old creeks. And if you see the left top photograph, it's a creek, an old creek, which was silted. We have really made it. It's a wonderful structure. If you go and see it, you will really feel happy. It gives livelihood to so many farmers. We have now been able to excavate around 300 kilometers of such creeks in Sundarban areas. It has changed. I have not been able to reap its full benefit now. I am now intensively working with prawn processing units and other people who would do prawn cultivation here with the help of Water User Association with a buyback system and a processing unit. This is a great thing. You will see a video on this. And this is the hilly areas. Hilly areas, the lifeline is Chora, the springs. If you have lived in hills, they are the lifeline of the hilly people. And there, our scheme design is totally focused on how to rejuvenate these joras, how to treat their upper catchment, how to make some kind of a check dam down below or water retention structure where water can be stored. We have also gone for hydrum schemes where there is a perennial jora. The kinetic energy of the water which is coming down is used to lift it up to some water tank, and then from there the irrigation happens. So that is what it is. In other areas where there is abundant groundwater, we have these tube wells, and mostly we are now going for solar tube wells. Solar based tube wells have their own problem of, sometimes people over extract water because the marginal cost of extraction of water and irrigation is nearly zero. But then the Water User Association is the piece in between. So what they do is they take some charges for water. So per hour they will take 50-60 rupees, and therefore that is keeping a little bit of uh, it it uh, it it is sufficient to do the behavioral changes in farmers. They don't do and don't over extract. There is abundant groundwater actually in these areas. So, and this is always a critique of solar systems. But then water associations in between has really helped us keeping it under control. And this is another area. We have a huge alluvial zone, one old alluvial and a new alluvial. So again, we have this scheme. Now here in this slide, you are seeing how a GIS-based system is used to design a check dam. We have a full system with huge parameters. Like we have got some 50-year rainfall data. So once somebody identifies a spot where check dam can be built, and if you take the lat long and then click it on the system, then this whole catchment area is automatically delineated, which means the entire rainfall into this area will pass through this check dam, and this will be so. And we have the rainfall data. So what the system does, it calculates, and even the suggested height and the width of the weir is primarily given by the system. So basically, it is a decision support tool which helps an engineer quickly design a check dam. And with all this system, the average time between approval and handover of a scheme, we have been able to reduce between batch 1 and batch 5 from the 635 days to 298 days. Just see the reduction that has happened. Now, when we execute a project in developmental arena, then one of the problems is how do you measure the impact? Generally, what happens in our system is the focus is generally on the utilization of funds and not on outcome. Outcome is, in fact, not always reviewed also. There is no time. Utilization of fund is reviewed, and by the time it is reviewed, the time is over. So That's the problem. Then the data collection and its validation is also an issue, because unless you have right data, you will not be able to measure the impact. Then there are a whole lot of externalities which are really difficult to measure and quantify. The difficulty is, that is how the cost benefit, if one becomes very strict about, to calculate the cost benefit of the developmental interventions, it becomes really very difficult to really correlate, because there are a whole lot of externalities which are not on the table, and then you get an impact which is actually less than what is really happening in the field. Then the other problem is, you don't have the counterfactual always, because you have to measure the impact in terms of the difference that your scheme made with respect to the counterfactual. And that is something which, let's say, in an irrigation structure, it becomes very difficult to really have this counterfactual. We try to do this, but then, so how did we address this issue in WBED MIP? So we insist on data collection right from the beginning. So when a project is conceptualized, at that time we take a socioeconomic survey. We try to figure out how many crops are being cultivated, what is the income level, how many small and marginal farmers, and so on and so forth, so that a baseline is created. And whenever, and after that, the scheme will come, and then we will see it, and then we will measure the stuff, the impact. Now, the the difficulty in this measurement with the pre and post thing, as you may already be aware, this problem of counterfactual. Because if I just take the baseline before and then the measurement after the scheme, it will give me the impact a little more than what has really happened due to that intervention, because there are a whole lot of other factors which might have, in any case, increased and enhanced the impact. So the difference of that with the measured impact is the actual impact, which is actually lower than the what we see with our eyes. So this is how we go about it. But then uh, there are ways, and there have been occasions in our project where we have tried to put up some counterfactual and did a data analysis. We did some internal evaluations. We keep doing them in our MIS. We, after the scheme is implemented, then the entire data is again uploaded. So we don't forget the scheme. After the scheme is implemented, we don't forget it. We keep talking about it. We keep looking at it. We keep interacting with the water reader associations, and they keep uploading the data. So we have a fairly good idea how it is happening. Then we also are now using GIS-based system, and the Google Earth Engine data is now available. Earlier it was difficult to download huge data. Now Google Earth Engine provides that. So since we have a lot of data available, satellite imageries, so we are able to do a lot of calculations about how many crops are being cultivated and what is happening, and so on. So uh, that really has helped. Then there have been many interns who come here, and they have gone to field, and they have randomly they have picked up schemes, did some use some statistical tools like difference and other tools, because we cannot do randomized controlled trials in this kind of a situation. But we have a lot of time series data available. So these tools they have used to really quantify what impact the project has been able to make. And indeed, there are third-party impact assessment in which IRMA itself participated. We had a really great time working with IRMA, and we learned a lot in the process. Now, this is just a flavor, just to give a flavor about how, if we can use the NDVI calculations, uh, uh, the vegetation index, what they call it, difference vegetation index. So that is normalized difference vegetation index. So it gives us a clue about how the cropping area is increasing. And if you see after the after we have put up the tube well, then whole lot of area is being irrigated. So that is the a true picture. So in government, actually in development, it becomes very difficult to really physically measure the command area, the cropping area. But with this use of satellite imageries, now we are able to do it very well and very fast and truthfully. You look at this slide. This slide tells us there is a series of check dams, series of 8 check dams. You'll be able to see these black triangles. So these triangles are one check dam. Okay, and this is the river flowing Rajnagar block, Birbhum. It was done in 2016, and then what happened that as year progressed, then every year the command area has gone up. You know, the initial was this red, and then we had this yellow, and then this is the green, and then blue, and then the green. So this gives us a very clear picture as to how the command area is expanding. Again, used with the satellite imagery. So the issue of measurement and how it is possible to look at it, because if you really try to measure it on ground with your field staff, let me tell you, it is just impossible. And if one does it, it's full of errors and difficulty. So with the same thing, we have been able to now even calculate the cropping intensity. And you will notice that the area which is down below this part has triple crop. What happens is when you put the check dams in series, then the moisture is maximum at the lower ranges, because the subsurface flow which comes from here will go there. Now here you have another scheme which is in South 24 Parganas. It is about water detention structure and how the Rabi command area after the scheme, if you can see this after the scheme, it has increased substantively. Earlier there was no crop happening here, but now again using satellite imageries, measurement truthfully, accurately being done. This is something which the interns did from Harvard Kennedy School. They had joined us, and then this zero is actually the time when the check dam is put in place. So this is the before this thing, and the area under cultivation, and then this is after the handover, and you can see how it is shooting up in pre-kharif. Our measurement has been that this pre-kharif generally the area has gone up substantively. So I think there were some 30 schemes which were randomly selected to reach this, and it was done with the difference in difference calculations using NDVI analysis. And this is for Rabi area. So Rabi, we didn't see that much of a difference, to be very honest, after the WUA handover. These are the changes in the non-ATMI project and ATMI project. So there are schemes which we do departmentally, but we don't do in an ATMI format, meaning we do not have water user associations there. We do not provide the agriculture, horticulture, and fishery inputs and services through that platform and so on. So we try to measure as to whether this is really worth taking this extra pain of working with water user association, and you just see the big difference that is there. So in the beginning, both the schemes had a similar level of revenue, but in ADMI, the jump is really very huge. And this is a summary of what all we have achieved like change in value of output, then how many WUA members, then how many are female members, then operational WUA, smaller marginal farmers, tribal, how much area we have been able to touch, then uh, uh, how many hectare meter of water volume we have been able to harness, and so on, and change in cropping intensity. Then last, I'm coming to institutional bottleneck. Every institution has its own peculiarities, and when I mean I have been assuming throughout in this presentation that this developmental initiative has been taken by a government agency, and I'm talking from that angle actually. You may not be having similar problem if the thing is being implemented by some other agency. So please don't extrapolate it there. I am strictly talking from my own institutional perspective. We do have a very poor last mile connectivity. If you look at the agriculture sector, the agriculture development officer ATO is placed in the block, one person in a block. So one person over a population base of around 2 lakh. Very difficult for that person to reach out. It's almost impossible. Then there are problems of departments working in silos. Division of work has not given the desired dividend. We have all specialized in our own arena. But as it happens, if you have to have the focus on outcome, then unless there is a synchronization and unless there is a complementarity, then you will not be able to give the desired output. And that is what happens. For example, the horticulture department is specialized in procuring quality saplings, but they are not into the irrigation structure. So what they do, they may have brought lakhs of saplings, planted them, but then the irrigation department has not put up the irrigation structure. So, you know, the mortality rate becomes very high and there is a problem. So this is a very big issue. Then in my own department, like engineers, they have, I mean, I don't blame anyone, but the reality is that they don't have enough experience in handling community and agriculture and so on and so forth. So there is this problem of mindset. And of course, members do not of WUA do not always collaborate. There are legacy issues, there are cases of infighting, there are problems, and that we have to handle. So what we have done in ADMI is local NGOs working in an area have been picked up to really bridge the last mile connectivity, and the project gives us that flexibility to pick up these NGOs. We are basically capitalizing their presence in a district which they have developed over several years. So they are already connected to the community. So by just hiring them, I automatically, in a flash, I get connected to the community through them. And that is how it has worked. Then to combat the problem of silos, we have this single window delivery of inputs through the water user association. So that has been one of the innovations in this project, that we don't go to the agriculture department. Once we create an irrigation infrastructure, after that we keep talking to farmers and we keep interacting with them to say, this is there and you can sow this seed, you can do this, you can do this fishing. And so we don't leave that, just we don't walk off just after creation of irrigation project. We do a whole lot of other things. We keep working on that plot for a very long time. So that is something which is very unique. And Water User Association, I won't say I have had very mixed results with Water User Association. In fact, Irma did a wonderful study on WUAs. And there are certain areas like Western Laterite districts where there have been, culturally, traditionally, they have this social norm of cooperation. They cooperate with each other. They somehow, there is a lot less fragmentation in society. So we have been able to work very well with one another. There is no fighting, nothing, no problem. But if you go to South 24 Parganas, I mean, there is so much of problem. The creeks that we have re-excavated, huge water bodies lying idle, I mean, that has been used only for agriculture, but fisheries they have not done because lack of collaboration, lack of trust, and lack of that there are so many problems. So that is why this ethical engagement with WUS, because we have been thinking very hard on how to structure the interface of WUA with government so that their members develop more trust. We cannot change their social context. We cannot change their norms and the society they belong to, the ideology they believe in. I mean, that is beyond our control. But then, if we engage with them and we set some rules of the game, there's some transparent rules, then it becomes very easy. Then the trust develops among the members, and it becomes easier for us to work. Then we have used WUAs to train farmers in other areas. So this horizontal knowledge sharing has really helped us bridge the deficit of manpower that is existing in our own institutional framework. And we have also used mobile-based messaging system. We have called it Krishikatha. So that has also helped. Then we use IoT-based tools, soil moisture meters, and so on, so that farmers, if they have it, they don't need our help. They on their own they can manage the water management plan and water plan every week. So Water User Association is really the central piece. I would say that's the biggest innovation that this project really brought to the table, and through them we have been able to they are there in operations and maintenance of irrigation structures. They collect water taxes. They have a small kitty through which they deseal the check dams and so on. They do better water management. The soil moisture meter is now being used by the Water User Association members slowly. We have made a beginning. We want to scale it up. Then whatever resources are available with them, they try to do the cropping planning and then use the water in a very judicious way. Their resource organization, the enterprising activities they have taken so many activities on their own. We didn't go to them, we didn't tell them. They became our implementing partners. I was explaining about horticulture. They have indeed become institution of social change, because in some cases, the water user association, which are fully willing members, they have stopped liquor selling in their villages, and really created a different kind of ecosystem. And they are also now going into hydrology monitoring, the water level monitoring, measurement, and so on. So basically, their expanding role from operation maintenance to water management to allied and welfare in this COVID, I mean, water user associations contributed a lot towards their colleague farmers. So they had saved some money, so they gave it to other farmers who were suffering. It was a wonderful example. We were really impressed the way they shared their own resources. This mobile-based advisory is a push call and inbound IVR message service. We do it both in Bengali and Hindi, and agriculture, horticulture, and fishery. All this is covered. There are feedback system also. It has covered 34,000 farmers. We have a pickup and listing rate of around 63%. And this is one of, again, I would say, one of the very good way to reach out to people where we cannot reach out, because it's very difficult to reach out. Our institutional framework, the manpower we have, it's impossible to really reach out. And Water User Association, this got the National Water Award by just a few days back. They run a tube well, a solar-based tube well, very good scheme in North 24 Parganas. So now I am just wrapping it up. This is perhaps my last slide. So we have learned a lot in this project. We have been able to solve certain problems. We have also not been able to solve certain problems. we have been able to solve partially some problems. And especially water user association, it is still a piece which is not fully understood. How we should structure that, how we should design that, so that, you know, to nudge them to collaborate. It's a very important piece, and we will keep working on this. We have created a huge structure with many specialists. I forgot to tell this to you. In fact, our lot of manpower deficit we have.
Hello, Sivansh.
Yes, sir.
Is it off from his side, Mr. side?
Yes, sir. I think there seems to be some sort of disruption in his internet.
Okay, Mr. Pare, Akhilesh ji?
I'm just calling him.
Yes, yes, yes.
Platform where doctors on building. So he's joining. Till then, I'm just running the video. Can you all see it, hear it?
Yeah, it's coming.
No, we can't see. We can't see.
No, but his computer screen is coming, so maybe he has to play. Akhilesh ji, if you play, I think we'll be able to watch.
Okay.
পৌষ মাসেতে বর্ষার ধানটা কেটে নিলে তারপরে থেকে ফাঁকা উদাউট পড়ে থাকে, গরু চড়ে আর এই নোনাতে ধুলো ওড়ে। আমাদের গ্রামের ইতিহাস এইটাই। যাই হোক, এই প্রকল্পের মাধ্যমে থেকে আমাদের সেই ধুলো ওড়াটা আপাতত বন্ধ হচ্ছে।
सर सुन पा रहे हैं ना? चलने दो।
Earlier also it was fine. अब just चला।
अच्छा बस चलने दो।
পৌষ মাসেতে বর্ষার ধানটা কেটে নিলে তারপরে থেকে ফাঁকা উদাউট পড়ে থাকে, গরু চড়ে আর এই নোনাতে ধুলো ওড়ে। আমাদের গ্রামের ইতিহাস এইটাই। যাই হোক, এই প্রকল্পের মাধ্যমে থেকে আমাদের সেই ধুলো ওড়াটা আপাতত বন্ধ হচ্ছে। এখানে সবুজ মাঠ তৈরি হয়ে গেছে।
The greater part of South 24 Parganas falls within the Gangetic Delta of the Sundarbans. The entire region is blessed with a huge network of interlinked rivers and creeks. But due to tidal activity of the Bay of Bengal, the surface water of those are saline and cannot be utilized for cultivation. Thus, almost the entire district is monocropped only during the monsoon, while the rest of the year is marked with poverty and despair.
কত কষ্ট করে চাষ করে শেষবেলা মানে ধান ফুলেছে, এই সময় আর জল দিতে পারিনি। খাল শুকিয়ে গেছে, মানে শ্যালো ট্যালো ছিল, তাতে জল ওঠে না, এরকম করে একদম পুরো চাষটা চলে।
আমাদের এখানে ভালো জল পেতে গেলে অন্তত 1000 ফুট আমাকে মাটির নিচে যেতে হবে ভালো অ্যাকুইফার পেতে গেলে। ন্যাচারালি এখানে একটা টিউবওয়েল করার কস্ট অনেক বেশি, খরচা অনেক বেশি। নট অনলি দ্যাট, ওই যে জল আমরা পাবো সেটা যে সবসময় তার কোয়ালিটি ভালো হবে এরকম কোনো ব্যাপার নেই। অনেক সময় দেখা যায় যে কিছু স্যালাইন পকেটে স্যালাইন জল থাকে, সেটা চাষের কাজে বা অন্য কাজে লাগে না। প্রাকৃতিকভাবে যেরকম বৃষ্টিও এখানে হয়, আমাদের এখানে আরেকটা সুবিধা আছে, সেটা আমরা দেখছি এখানে অনেক ক্রিক্স আছে, পুরনো খাড়ি, এককালে জল চলাচল করতো কিন্তু এখন মজে গিয়ে একদম মাঠের মতোই হয়ে গেছে। সেগুলো কিন্তু সবই ভেস্টেড ল্যান্ড। তো আমরা সেই ভেস্টেড ল্যান্ড, সেই ক্রিক্সগুলোকে আমরা এক্সকাভেট করছি, এগুলোকে এক্সপ্লোর করছি।
But these excavations were not an easy task to execute. Initially, the officials of the District Project Management Unit, DPMU, who are implementing the project, had to face immense difficulty while preparing the lands suitable for excavation. The lands belong to the government, but to deposit the excavated earth, private lands were required.
আমাদের কিছু কিছু মানুষ আমাদের সমস্যার মধ্যে পড়তে হয়েছিল। সেই সমস্যা বলতে গিয়ে যেমন মাটির আটা কোন জায়গায় রাখবো, কারণ বুঝে যাওয়া খাল তো প্রচুর মাটি।
Here, the DPMU officials could convince the villagers to lend their precious share of lands in exchange of a promise towards better agriculture. The West Bengal Accelerated Development of Minor Irrigation Project, ADMI, a World Bank funded project implemented by the Water Resources Investigation and Development Department, has been successfully excavating the silted creeks for the water detention structures, the WDS, and thereby store the sweet rainwater for irrigation purposes.
আমাদের যে খালটা কাটা হলো আদমি প্রকল্প থেকে, যে খালটা কাটার পরে আমাদের যে জলটা পরিমাণে দাঁড়িয়েছে, তাই দেখে কিছু কিছু লোক চাষ করলো, করে করে আস্তে আস্তে দেখছে যে পুরো ভরে গেছে, আর জলটা আমাদের ফালতু কেউ নষ্ট হতে দিচ্ছে না, যাতে জলটা খুব ভালোবাসছি আমরা, যে জলটা যাতে ফালতু নষ্ট না হয়, এই চাষের জায়গায় বিভিন্ন রকমের কাজে লাগাই, সেই জন্য জলটা খুব আমাদের গ্রামের লোক এত খুশি আছে যে বিভিন্ন আগের থেকে আমাদের অনেক হাজার হাজার গুণ ধান খুব ভালো হয়েছে। আমার তাতে তো খুব ধন্যবাদ।
The restored sweet water in the WDSs has altered the socio-economic status of the farmers within the command area. Large hectares of land are now being cultivated and are yielding better crop produce during the Kharif season. The WDSs have also ensured the Moro paddy, as well as the diversified crops of pulses, oilseeds, and different types of vegetables during Rabi, and sesame and vegetables in pre-Kharif seasons, thus inviting sustainable development.
বিঘে প্রতি হয়তো ধান যদি লস হয়ে যায়, হলো না ধানটা, তাহলে লাভ আর হলো না। ফুলটা চাষ করে আমরা দেখতে পাচ্ছি আমাদের পাড়ায় ঘাড়ে এইটা দেখা যাচ্ছে, এখন আমাদের ফুল চাষ করা লাভ হচ্ছে, মানে যে তেলটা আমরা পাচ্ছি একসঙ্গে মনে হচ্ছে আমাদের খুব ভালোই হচ্ছে।
বর্ষায় 10 বস্তা পেলাম, আবার যদি বোরোতে যদি 12 বস্তা ধান পাই, আমাদের সারা বছরের খোরাকিটা মিটলো, সেই সাথে সাথে সবজিও আমাদের পেয়ে গেলাম। এখানে আমরা আমাদের নিজস্ব সংসার খরচা চালিয়ে উদ্বৃত্ত যে ফসল হবে, সে ফসলটা বাজারে বিক্রি করলে আমার তো পয়সা আসবে না।
এবং এছাড়া আমাদের আদমি প্রকল্পের মাধ্যমে উন্নত যন্ত্রপাতি আমাদের দিচ্ছে, আধুনিক উন্নত যন্ত্রপাতি, যেগুলোর সাহায্যে আমরা অনেক সহজে ত্বরান্বিত চাষটাকে এগিয়ে নিয়ে যেতে পারছি।
এখানে আমাদের আগের যে বিঘা প্রতি 10 কেজি ধান লাগতো, এখানে বিঘা প্রতি 3 কেজি ধানে আমরা কমপ্লিট করছি। এবং আমাদের যে বীজতলা মানে অনেকটা জায়গা লাগতো, সে বীজতলা আমাদের ফেলতে হচ্ছে না, ডাইরেক্ট জমি কমপ্লিট করে নিয়ে সারিবদ্ধভাবে ড্রাম্পের সাহায্যে আমরা ধান রোপণ করছি। তাতে দেখা যাচ্ছে ন্যূনতম বীজতলার যে একটা জনের খরচ ছিল, সে জনের খরচটা বেঁচে যাচ্ছে, এবং রোপণ করার জন্য বিঘা প্রতি 2, 3, 4 লোক লেগে যায়, সেটাও আমাদের বেঁচে যাচ্ছে।
Now, the harvesting season is not restricted to Kharif anymore. WDSs have transformed agriculture into a year-long activity. The target of incorporating beneficiaries from designed command area could not be achieved due to the absence of centralized lifting devices and water distribution system. As a result, individual farmers are left with no option but to irrigate their land at their own initiative. Additional sources of livelihood have been generated by exploring horticulture along the WDS. The embankments are utilized by planting mixed fruit trees like coconut, papaya, drumstick, banana, and at some places intercropping them with seasonal vegetables on either sides of the embankment. Some WUAs have even tried social forestry in collaboration with local panchayats. A tentative estimate indicates that average income from fruit-yielding trees within 1 kilometer WDS may be up to rupees 1,62,000 per year. Intensive pisciculture by Fisheries Interest Group, FIG, formed from within a water users association, has opened up a new source of sustainable economic development by commercially utilizing the standing waters of the WDSs, which is almost 3 meters deep and with an average width of 16 meters. The ADMI project significantly contributed towards encouraging the FIGs to take up mixed cultivation of varieties of fish like chitol, bhetki, giant prawn and others. With the passage of time, WUAs are not only taking up diversified economic activities, but also meeting various social commitments, like constructing bridges over WDS to facilitate connectivity, organizing boat race and other community events to motivate villagers towards stronger community participation in protecting the WDSs. ADMI project is striving hard to harness the resources to its full potential for generating gainful employment and incremental income for the farmers through intensive agriculture, horticulture and fishery. The magic waters of the WDS already left impact in retarding migration of labor from this district.
এমব্রয়ডারি মেশিনে কাজ করতে এখন দেশে আছে চাষবাস করছে বাড়িতে আর আরেকটা ছেলে চাষ করে সে খুব চাষের আগ্রহ এই চাষ নিয়ে সে খুব আনন্দ পায়
Miraculously, the surface waters of a network of 89 WDSs, totaling a length of about 205 kilometers, irrigating about 4,379 hectares of land, while covering nearly 10 blocks out of the 29 blocks of the entire district, namely Baruipur, Canning, Joynagar, Kultoli, Bashoddi, Shagor, Gosaba, Mograhat have benefited almost 10,481 farmers. The journey has just begun. The road towards bringing a long-term visible change in the lives of the entire rural community with enhanced income is far to be reached.
Okay, I believe sir has already joined, Mr. Misra. Yeah.
I think, Professor Day, I am all through with the presentation, and I took a very long time, I think. But then now if we can open it for some questions, if there is time. I don't know how much time was allotted, and
Yeah, we can take a few questions, sir. Fine.
Please.
First, sir, I would like to thank you for such an in-depth and elaborate description and analysis. We do not get a lot of opportunity to listen such kind of lectures, particularly from those who are the practitioners, bureaucrats, and who look at development from a more implementing authority perspective. So in that way, we are really got enriched by the lecture, and probably more things would become clearer if we go for a question answer session. So I would like to open the floor. So if you have any questions, anybody can ask questions. So it's not a bad idea if you speak out. That is also, but otherwise, oh, there are already some questions. I mean, there are a lot, in fact. Yeah. So. So there are comments that's very insightful and gives a lot of help in terms of project management and several other factors, forecastings. Sir, please elaborate on how focus on utilization of resource are limitation and measure to control the outcome. So that is a question, I suppose. So first of all,
can you please repeat the question?
I just say, so first states that with the help of principles of project management, we can monitor utilization of resources. But when it comes to outcome impact, several factors come into picture that cannot be forecasted. For instance, regional politics, corruption, etc. Sir, can you, sir, please elaborate on how focus on utilization of resources are limitation? So that is, in fact, my question as well. I also have this question, and measures to control the outcome. So I don't think that, I'm not sure about the last thing, but yeah. So, but of course.
Yeah, this is a very important point. The issue is how best we can utilize the resource. So in the beginning, when we were building the check dams in the first year and first batch and like that, then we had no check dam used to cost less than 1.2 crore, 1.5 crore and so on. But then we realized that a lot of design optimization was possible. And then we had several workshops. We optimized the design. That was a big reform that happened in the engineering sector, because all those big projects with a lot of padding and that invites a lot of malpractices and so on. So that way we could firm up certain design specification and made it so per hectare meter. Earlier, if the charges were 50 lakh rupee for a structure, it went down to 20-25 lakh per hectare meter of water. So it was a very closely monitored, and we had to face a lot of internal resistance also. But we went back and forth, and we were very firm in our commitment, and we said that no, we will definitely make it happen, and it happened. So I don't know whether that has answered your question, but that is. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir, you're audible. I think international might have.
You can add anything which you wanted to ask and which I didn't reply. So you can repeat those parts which are left out in my answer, please. So I'll clarify.
No, sir, nothing is left out. I just want to add one more. From my side, another clarification. So I just want to know that you said how there was an innovation in engineering that also took place in check dam. So that's how the cost came down. So did local synergy between local knowledge and the engineering knowledge? That's from, I mean, did you find any opportunity of synchronizing this knowledge? Did the engineering knowledge got benefited from local knowledge in this whole exercise?
Yes, absolutely. Because nowadays our engineers mostly are on lookout for this earthen check dams. So they talk to villagers, and wherever these check dams have come up, they pick them up. So that way, because then there is already a water user group for that earthen check dam. So there is a felt need. A lot of parameters are set in place. So you don't have much of difficulty in really picking it up, then making it happen. So that way the engineers have really got benefited.
Okay, so I'll take other questions. Sir, in the process of the question is from Vamsi. He asked that, sir, in the process of generalizing livelihoods, the construction of water harvesting structures has really impacted the lives of many. But for the construction of these water harvesting structures, many are times the private players entered these villages for constructing construction mitigation the opportunities of locals. How to control in this project? Vamsi, and the last portion is not very clear to me.
Yeah, I have understood. No problem. I'll answer. No problem. So perhaps what Vamsi is trying to ask is that when I am bringing a private player to build a check dam or excavate this creek, then the locals, that particular opportunity is deprived from the locals. So to that extent, the money goes to somebody sitting in Kolkata who is providing that JCB and all those machines. Is that, I hope that's the question. And see, the issue is that there, in irrigation system, there are various kinds of structure. Let us look at the solar operated tube well. I am giving an example. Now, if you expect that there will be somebody in a local area who will be able to do that, that doesn't really happen. You have to bring somebody from outside. So as the technical complexity of infrastructure goes up, then this is inevitable. You can't do anything about it. But then there are situations in which you can do a lot, like I had mentioned that when there is a horticulture program. Now, one way in government, in fact, many a time horticulture is done through contractors. But we didn't do that. So what are the associations where the implementing agency, and they were given the contract, and they even hired JCB for pit cutting because the soil was very hard. And in fact, the whole because we gave them money as per the schedule of rate, and schedule of rate has a small piece of profit. So that profit went to water user association. And in Bankura, one water user association, in the process when they were doing this horticulture on a piece of 80 bigha, they earned something like 3 to 4 lakhs. They saved basically. So wherever possible, we have been trying to give this work to the locals. But then, as I said, there is a trade-off. If the technical complexity goes up, then you can't do it.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'll take another question.
Sir, can I walk in for a moment?
Yeah, sure.
Yes, please.
Sir, thank you very much. Mishra, sir, good evening to you. My name is Hitesh Bhatt.
Good evening. Good evening.
Sir, I'm so sorry that I could not be present when you arrived at 4 o'clock because we had another event called DocMet, Doctoral Colloquium on Management and Development, in which I had to play a very important role there, sir, as almost like a master of ceremony. So please pardon me. And I requested, sir, thank you very much for coming. And I was listening to you in between, and so you made a wonderful impact by your speech, sir. Thank you very much for coming, sir. And we hope, sir, one day we'll see you on our campus. We really hope that, sir. Thank you very much. And Professor Dey, you're one of the finest person.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. going on mute now, but I'm listening to you all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Mishra, sir, I just wanted to tell that Professor Hitesh Bhatt is the director of our institute. So he was not able to present
No problem.
we started, so he just joined later on. So he was
Absolutely fine. I'm delighted that you have been able to join us. Now, the second question there is, I can read it. So, the second question is, as the project progresses, there might be several conflicts among the project stakeholders. How do you ensure that even with that, there is continuous engagement and trust among the stakeholders, along with similar level of commitment? What are the factors which ensure long-term sustainability even after you exit? Yes, this is the question, and something which has been worrying us, and I was briefly touching in my presentation. Much depends upon the water user association. See, because we hand it over and we keep nurturing them, but then if there is a conflict in the among the members of the water user association, then there is real difficulty. And I had some discussion on this with Professor Day when he had come, and we, in fact, it ignited my interest in community-based organizations after Irma's work in our project. That was really an eye-opener for us, because now we started thinking very hard. As I was mentioning, if you set some principles of transparency, like I will tell you, there is generally, I have compared, we were building a case study, 2 WDS in South 24 Pargana, the video that you just saw. 2 WDS, similar length, similar everything. The results are totally different. In one, there is so much of passion, the community is engaged, involved. We have withdrawn from both the sides. But then the other one, there is so much conflict. There is so much conflict that it is really unbelievable. One group had planted some, as you might have seen in the video, there was this, we had a lot of plantations on the embankments, because for various reasons. Then there were some vegetables done on the embankment. So in one of the project, there was so much done. In another one, when they were planted, the other group came and at night they cut out all the trees. So we have had these problems. These are real life problems. But then I believe that if you set some rules of transparency, simple rules, like, for example, we have seen that if you have more number of meetings, there is more level, generally the confidence level among members goes up, and then there is a lot of cooperation and sustainability of project is higher. Whenever there is money, some money is withdrawn from the bank account, then there has to be necessarily a meeting preceding that. So since we enter the area with an asset, we can impose certain rules on these water user associations. We tell them that, look, if you are willing to work like this, we are with you, otherwise we will not build this asset. So we keep talking to them, we are in touch with them, and if these rules of transparency are observed, then there is more likelihood that they will be like, if the dividend that comes, if the income is distributed properly, if there is a fairness in distribution, if the water is distributed properly, if there is a fairness in distribution of water, there are so many issues. So very carefully, these rules of the game, if somebody steals water, then the fellow has to be punished. So there are whole lot of things which have to be put on the table to really make it sustainable. So the next question is, can you explain in brief how villagers were convinced to give up their own land for the project, and how did the trust building process happen? What was the critical mass in enabling people to come forward? Excellent question. See, who will give their precious land for a project? It's a question which is really, and that is a puzzle. And you know how it happened? I was also puzzled at how people are giving their land. See, what happens was that people first said that, yes, this is a creek, a silted creek. So we said, yes, we are ready to excavate. And then, as was shown in the video, huge earth cutting. I mean, where to put it? It's very difficult. There is all private land, on both sides. You have to put it on the plan. You can't take it away from there. Where will you dump it? So people came forward, and that is precisely the question. The question, the answer to this question is that when the creek was re-excavated and the water started flowing, then the price of land, which was just near that creek, went up by 60%, almost, because water was available. Instead of one crop, you get 2 crop, 3 crop, and so on. Farmers realized that if this creek comes into our area, even if I give a part of my land, even then I am getting benefited. So economics work like that. I mean, this is a very, I had not thought about it. It happened, it played out. I mean, my hats off to my officials and the field functionaries who were working it out with community. I can't tell you, we had the first creek excavated in 2017, 2.5 kilometers long. And it happened like that. And after that, we never looked back. And then people came from the other villages to see these things happening in other villages. And then they start coming to our people and project office that we also want our creeks to be re-excavated. This has been, by the way, a very long-standing demand of people living in Sundarbans. Somehow, maybe because of budget, because of whatever, it was not addressed, not taken care. So there is huge demand. I mean, I am not able to meet. The video showed 205 kilometers. The latest figure is 302 kilometers or like that, more than 300 kilometers. I am now, my limiting factor is the number of officials I have. So it's very tough. I can't deliver more than this thing. I think these are the questions. I can't see any other question.
Sir, Mr. If it's possible, sir, I'll just ask you one more question. So you initially started the talk with the moral hazard problem, and you gave the example in Bankura where you have given the buffalo and the person has stopped as a rickshaw puller. Now, did you find similar thing happening over here, or if at all, how have you taken that factor into mind that, I mean, such kind of moral hazard problem should not happen, because in that case, the overall objective of the project may get defeated. So,
see, the moral hazard issue I have not encountered, maybe because of the peer pressure. When you work with a group, then there is a water user association, there is a group dynamics, and even if somebody wants to really play tricks, the fellow is unable to do that. And then there are rules of games well laid out on the table. So that helps. But if you work with individuals, then it becomes very difficult. The way it happened in that buffalo case. Yes.
So in the presentation also, we found that, I mean, probably this Harvard Business School, our Kennedy School of Governance, they did a difference by difference model where surprisingly, I find that the Kharif uplift, pre-Kharif is higher.
Pre-Kharif is higher.
Okay. Pre-Kharif is much higher than the Rabi.
Rabi, yes. It has, I mean, that is what has come out of that result. We are still, see, pre-Kharif, we have a feeling that the residual moisture or the overall moisture in the area, because of the water harvesting structure, maybe that has got enhanced. That may be one reason. Rabi, yes, Rabi was in fact more than pre-Kharif. Rabi was our prime target. We were thinking that it should be. But then I have come across check dams where there has been a lot of things going on in Kharif, but not in Rabi. And there are a whole lot of other factors which have come into play, you know, because farmers have to make some investment in seeds and other things. And then if there is a credit linkage failure, Kisan credit card and all those instruments are there. So then the other problem is that people watch. They are risk averse. So if you build a check dam, the first year they will not go for Rabi. So they will wait. They will see how long the water remains. And then next year maybe. That's why in one of the slides, when I was showing the satellite maps, in Rajnagar, Birbhum, the full command area of 64 hectare was not achieved in the first year itself. It took us around 3-4 years to reach that. And it happens like that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there any other questions?
Sir, I think there is one question by Rajita.
But I don't see. Can you just read out the question?
Yes, sir, sure. As the project progresses, there might be several conflicts among the project stakeholders. How do you ensure that even with that, there is continuous engagement and trust among the stakeholders, along with similar levels of commitment? What are the factors which ensure long-term sustainability even after you exit?
Yeah, I think we discussed a part of this, like when I was talking about the Water User Association and how they are the people who will take it forward. And if there is a lot of understanding and the trust and faith among the members, so all our effort goes into building that trust. We keep working very hard on it. We don't leave the group even after the infrastructure is in place. So we keep working with them, we keep nurturing them. And then we take them to other areas. We bring farmers from other areas to that Water User Association. So they feel a part of a bigger community. They feel that we are being watched, we are being, and if something good has happened, then it is showcased. Like I showed one Water User Association getting a national award. So these are all the things which create that an ecosystem is very important, in which people believe that we are doing a good job, and that is something which really gives them that satisfaction, and this helps.
So one thing is that in my class, I always teach and say that, well, when there could be social norms which can conflict, which could be very conflict-ridden, and then collective action could be very difficult. And but again, their managers can change these things, right? Because of managers can set rules and regulations, and which you are saying as transparency. Now, what I'm trying to say is that I used to tell it, but there is a little gap in my conviction, because that's come from my studies. But now this gap has been filled, because now the practitioner has also said that this is how it works. So I think so that's how we are really, now I'm quite convinced that it works like that. So I don't see, sir, any other questions. So anyway, I think the biggest beneficiaries of this talk is us, particularly Irma, who has been promoting the collective organizations and collectivism, and Water Users Associations is a part of collectivism, and when the chief of the organization talks about this thing, then we also get this convincing argument of what we actually learned from the books. Actually, that gets validated by the talk. So, sir, it was a quite enlightening talk, and particularly the question and answer session also gave a lot of ideas. And we have actually taken a lot of your time for this. And so thank you for this engagement. Hope, sir, we will be able to engage with you as well as the Water Users Associations in future in a much broader way. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.